Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being the show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Supernatural as well as the season premiere of Beyond. Like always, if I'm talking about something you don't want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include the time and I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I had to say about this week's episode of Supernatural, you can skip to what I had to say about the season premiere of Beyond. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is the latest episode of Supernatural. Another great episode. I love what they did with this episode because it's something they don't do too often throughout the show. Like, I think there's only been like one episode that clearly comes to mind. Basically, an episode that doesn't focus on Sam and Dean. And this was kind of an episode that still had Sam and Dean in a good chunk of it, but it was like there was an episode beforehand. There was a whole like aspect of like most of the like 99% of the episode didn't include Sam and Dean until like the very end. It's the one about like the found footage episode about like, oh, one friend becomes a werewolf, and it led to the girl to be the only werewolf who they ended up bumping into later on with her whole sister situation, that whole situation. Nevertheless, going on a tangent, but I like the fact that this is kind of like the ladies of Supernatural. I kind of sad that I went to this episode kind of spoiled ahead of time because earlier this week I was looking up some stuff and I stumbled across a picture from this episode. It was a picture of Kaya, Patience, and Claire. I was like, what? But I did not know about the Jody and Donna situation, so that was kind of a nice twist, and Alex too. But I like what this episode did because it kind of like took a lot of stuff and kind of it took time to flesh out some characters that, kind of building up this group. It's like, Sam and Dean are in trouble. We got to go help them, and them all kind of coming together like this. I thought that was kind of nicely done. A lot of interesting things. We kind of learn more about the way Claire handles things. I mean, she's kind of always been a wild card in the past, but I really like what they did with her character in this episode because it's like, Jodie's always worrying about her, and Claire's just like, well, she's so smothering about that, so I had to get away. And Alex had to be like, what are you talking about? Just because you left, it didn't change anything. Jodie's still going to worry about you because you're important to her. And I guess, because Claire, it's not necessarily that Claire's looking for death. It's not like she's like, maybe in the past, maybe she was kind of fine with it in the sense of like, she didn't care where her life ended up. And this is like, as long as I go out in a blaze of glory, that's kind of what Sam and Dean kind of think. That just kind of typically how hunters in general think. It's like, well, basically, you're going to ultimately get put down during a job. It's just, you're not just going to live like, oh, happily ever after. It doesn't exist for hunters. There is no happily ever after. There's always another battle, another monster, another demon, another something on the horizon waiting for you, essentially. But this episode, especially upon meeting Patience with the whole like, oh yeah, you're going to die thing, it kind of set something inside of Claire that she's never felt for a while, and that's fear, because she's always charged forward. She's like, oh, the fact of the matter is, because you charge forward, you save more people's lives, because if you take time to try and like calculate and come up with the perfect plan and stuff, people get killed. But in that situation, it's like, well, you also risk, if you get killed, that means future victims exist too. So it's always right to make sure that you do plan stuff out. Also, to make sure you're properly prepared to take on a thing that you need to take on, because knives may not always be the solution. Regular guns might not always be the solution. You might need a perfect concoction of certain items. So there's a lot more to certain monsters and stuff like that. So Claire's never really, it's like, okay, she accepted. She's like, okay, I'm going to die on a job, but it's like, thinking about death is very different from knowing, you're going to die. To the point, like, even Jodie was like, stay back. And she's like, okay. And it's like, wait, what? I was like, oh, you want to do it because you want to protect Kaya and stuff. You're like, okay, I'm going to listen to you this time and protect him. It's like, oh, no, it's because you were scared, which is understandable. Like, I don't think it's a bad thing to be afraid. Being afraid, a lot of shows will teach you, is like, oh, yeah, being afraid keeps you alive because it keeps you on edge. It keeps you always ready, always kind of have your guard up, essentially, so. You could also see it earlier, even in the episode with Claire, because of the fact that she didn't want to listen to Patience. When Patience is like, yeah, you're going to die. It's like, no, I'm not going to die. How often are you right? It's like, are your visions always right? It's like, well, no, because I'm kind of still new to this. So it's like, it's just, that was fear response, because it's like, oh, it's just like, oh crap, this is serious. And even more so when Patience's vision of like, oh, the monster's coming to attack them, which is kind of interesting because those monsters, we don't even have a name for them or what they are, because they are from the other world. It seems like it kind of very much reminds you of kind of like predators to a certain extent. I don't know. It's just kind of interesting. It doesn't seem like necessarily there's anything unique in particular about them, except for the fact that they can, once they get your scent, they never let go, and they run in packs. That seems to be their only thing. There's nothing else characteristic about them, at least at this point in time. Doesn't seem like they're the easiest things to kind of take down, but I guess you do enough damage. Also, the whole blue blood situation, so that's kind of interesting. Another character kind of took me by surprise in this episode was Alex, because Alex has long said like, oh, she's going to leave this life behind and everything, but it's like, no, she's here helping Jody and everything. She has a job and everything, but her job, she works at a hospital and stuff, allows her access to help out Jody with certain things as well. I even love the whole thing about like, yeah, your mom's Jody's back there burying a monster in your backyard. It's just like, oh yeah, they got to get buried somewhere. Which is something I never think about. Is this the first time the show's ever acknowledged a situation like that? Like, oh yeah, what do you do with a monster's body? Do you just leave it there? It's like, no, you dispose of it. I mean, I guess in retrospect, it's kind of like, or rather hindsight, it's like, well, I guess you would just burn it or something like that. With the whole, like the way they do hunters' bodies, but in this particular case, it's like, we'll burn it just to dispose of the evidence. But it's like, I don't know, I don't think I ever gave it much thought about like, oh, they just killed that monster and his body's laying there. I mean, in some cases, depending on the creature, sometimes their body would just fade away just for whatever reason. But it's like, I never thought about that. It's like, how many monsters are buried in the back of Jody's yard? How many monsters are buried all over the U.S. thanks to the Winchesters and any other hunter? But in particular, Winchesters, everything they've done over the past literal 13 years at this point, so, but nevertheless, because going back to it, Alex was so adamant about leaving this life behind, but maybe it's just because Alex is that example of like, there is no escaping this life. You can try to have a normal life, but you will always be a part of it. This world will kind of find a way of sucking you back in. But at the same time, it's like, well, Jody's her mom, not her biological mom, but still her mom nonetheless. So it's like, if I can help you out here a little bit and there, like, I don't have to be completely taken over by this hunter life, but if I can help you in some shape or form to make sure that you're okay, to make sure our family stays okay, then I'll do it, I help out whatever way I can. Because she also brought up something that, is prevalent amongst hunters. It's like, you don't need to be a fighter just to be a hunter. Hunters come in different shapes and forms of like, support, and maybe you stockpile the items needed for a fight. Maybe you could be, the operational support essentially, so not everyone needs to be battle ready. So some interesting things, like I said, going back to it, Sam and Dean, actually seeing them in this episode kind of took me by surprise. For one, like I said, I was a little sad that, because I brought this up I might have brought it up last episode, but definitely like in a video I was talking about, I was like, I hope their situation and when the show picks back up will leave them in that world for a little while. It turns out not to be the case. I kind of had a feeling it was only going to be a one episode thing. But still, it's a little sad. I did enjoy, like, it's like, oh yeah, He's like, Sam's like, oh, don't tell me it tastes like chicken. He's like, no, Sam, it's a lizard. It tastes like lizard. But that didn't stop Dean from going back to get some of the lizard he left behind when they were about to leave their campfire and everything. I thought that was kind of interesting. Also, I was actually surprised that we actually got to finally see what that monster thing is that's like running through the forest. It looks like it looked like almost like a King Kong type thing, but especially the way its feet looks, not unless that was a different thing entirely, but there's the one that has the huge prints that they're stepping in, like at the end of last episode. We see a kind of recap of it in this episode too, but it's like, is that the same thing or what? It's got those red eyes and it's taller than trees. It's like, what do you do in a world like that? That world sucks with something like that running around. That was kind of interesting. And also Sam and Dean being served up as dinner, essentially. It was just nice to kind of see them all come together, especially Donna teaching. It's like, oh, Donna, how do you have all these weapons? It's like, oh, because I live in Minnesota, which I love her Minnesotan accent. Patience, first time using a gun. It was kind of interesting, too, because of the whole thing, because she felt like she wasn't really much use. She ended up was going to go back to her dad, but it's like, I think at this point, I don't know if your dad would have really taken you back. It's kind of sad that he gave you that ultimatum. It's like, you're trying to help out people. And he's like, oh, you go down this route, don't come back in my life. It's like, as you said, the exact same thing happened, and you didn't hear from your mom for years, and you didn't know about anything until she died. So it's like, that's kind of a crappy thing to do, especially as a father, considering the fact that your little girl is still a teenager and everything. So I feel like you should be a little more supportive in what she wants to do, help her out, help her, increase her skill. I mean, I guess it doesn't really matter in the long run because she's with them now. kind of this is her new family help. I like Jodie's family too is growing. Like she's got all these daughters who aren't her daughters, but who are essentially her daughters, you know? So other things. For one, I was actually shocked about the Kaya situation. I was like, wait, what? Kaya's dead? I was like, no. I was like, there's gotta be more to it. Because there's no way Kaya's dead. And it's like, you just introduced her last episode. I was like, oh, I guess that's their way of removing the whole plot element of like, well, she can, you know, being a dream walker, she can essentially help locate and go to other worlds and stuff like that. I guess that's her way of getting around it. I was like, but wondering, like, oh, who's the person underneath the hood? And lo and behold, who's the person under the hood? It's Kai. I'm like, what is that? And then immediately in my brain, I go, okay, Sam brought it up himself. There's the whole aspect of like, no, this isn't a different world. This is a different universe. And it's the same thing as that other reality that Mary's stuck in. It's an alternate reality. So the world that they were on was Earth, but it was a different Earth that went down different circumstances. So that was Kaya. That was either Kaya from a different that reality, that world, that universe is Kaya killing herself so that she could come back to this world, because maybe certain worlds, or maybe it applies to all worlds, that you can't have two people who are the same person coexisting at the same time. Because, you know, creates a paradox and stuff like that. Because that circumstances hasn't come up yet about two people from the same, like two. Because anytime that situation's come up so far, like it's only been one person. So this is kind of the first instance of two people existing in the same paradox of like existing in the same universe. So maybe that's what that was all about. Or maybe that person just possessed Kaya's body at the end. It's like, no. Either way, it's still kind of sad because it's like, well, that's not the Kaya we knew. Even though we only got to know her, it's still sad because it's like, well, that Kaya is still dead. It's like when you find out that there's a clone of a person, it's like, oh yeah, that person, it's like, oh, this person died. It's like, well, you have this clone, but it's like that clone isn't that person. It's like, you know, maybe this other Kaya might have the same memories. Well, probably won't have the same memories, might have the same personalities, or even the personality might be different because who you are is kind of based around nature versus nurture type of situation. It's like, well, depending on your experiences, it changes what kind of person you might end up being. So as we can see, this particular Kaya was willing to sacrifice people, you know, for survival. You know, it doesn't seem like the Kaya that we kind of got to slightly know. It doesn't seem like she was really like that. Well, to a certain extent, she was kind of like that because she was kind of a survivor, kind of always on her own. But to throw people under the bus like that wouldn't be her, like sacrificing people like that. To the extent that she went with Claire to help save Sam and Dean kind of proves that, you know, so. And that's another thing too about what I appreciate about this episode too. This episode is kind of creating the aspect of legacy. I mean, the entirety of this show is kind of all about legacy, because the legacy that Sam and Dean have built, like, see, that's always brought up the question, like, oh, what about us? We're kind of a speck on the map of like, oh, the grand scheme of things. But it's like, no, not yes. There's the whole aspect of like, well, you've saved the world multiple times, so you play a big role in all this. But it's also all the people's lives you've touched, all the people you've saved. You know, those people are passing that on. You know, it's like when you look at Jodie's situation with all the ladies, with Donna, Patience, Claire, and Alex, like all with her, you know, all people kind of wrapped up in this supernatural world, finding their own path and everything. It's kind of, you know, they're kind of keeping the torch alive. It's up to them to eventually pass it on. The torch was passed on to them by the Winchesters, and now they pass it on. So it's like, it's just kind of, like I said, they represented a lot, but just it applies to a lot of people that the Winchesters have met over the course of the series that they've fought alongside, whether it be, you know, Castiel or even Crowley. Would be this kind of like, oh, this is a legacy that they've built, you know? So it's just kind of interesting thing when you think about it. It's also interesting considering the fact that person is Kaya, and Claire's like, oh yeah, when we find the person who killed Kaya, I'm going to kill them. So I also appreciate the fact that, like I said, she also walked away from this being like, you know, it's just like, they think I'm staying here because I'm broken. No, I'm staying here because they're my family and I need them, you know? It's always interesting because she pushed so far away from this group, and it's like now she's being with them. And like I said, Patience is there too. So Jodie's family is just growing more and more. So we didn't tackle it at all, the whole Jack situation, but I'm sure that's going to be an episode all on its own. But nevertheless, I did like that Jodie it kind of adds into what I was bringing up, because Jodie's like, you guys saved the world, leave Sue false to us. I'm like, that's kind of, and I think because they set that up too, we're definitely going to be circling back to this story. Whether it's going to be this season or not, I feel like it will be, considering the fact is that there was probably enough of those creatures. Because there's only like, because there wasn't enough time for anything from that alternate reality that Mary's in for any of those to cross over into this world. But there was enough time for those things from that world, the bad place, to kind of come over, and so is that other Kaya. So, like I said, very interested to find out about that whole situation too. Like I said, overall, a great episode. I'm very interested to see what goes down in the next episode. And now moving on to the season premiere of Beyond, a great season premiere. The show kind of did an interesting thing that I really like. I kind of like, it's this little weird thing I like, is that when shows actually take place over a short period of time, it's kind of interesting, because basically we get a full time frame for the entirety of the show. Basically from now to since the beginning of this series when Holden woke up, it's been exactly 2 months. It's actually been like a month between season 2's premiere and the season 1 finale. I don't know why, it's just kind of interesting, especially because recently I've been bringing it up like, oh yeah, there's always like a 6 months gap recently with a lot of stuff in between seasons, but it's like in this case it's like, nope, it's been like a month. So I don't know, I just like the fact that it's such a like tight knit like time span. Everything in season 1 happened over the course of like a month, so I don't know, I thought that was kind of interesting. But nevertheless, there is a lot to really break down about this particular season. Obviously there's the whole relationship situation, because it's like, oh yeah, because it's like, it's also interesting too, seeing like, Jeff and Holden having those conversations about relationship. Like, I really love that situation of like them becoming buddies and friends and stuff like that. I just really like that, because he's even talking to him about the whole Charlie and Willa situation. He in fact actually looked for Charlie for Holden, which Holden's kind of like, no, it was just to make sure that she was okay. But obviously there's a little more to that. But at the same time, it's like, well, he's with Willa, and I'm sure he doesn't want to really admit that, because if he admitted it, it's a complicated situation. It's almost kind of a love triangle type of situation. But it seems like things between him and Willa are good. I do appreciate in these episodes that the fact is that he even had a whole situation where she like wouldn't come over to their house and everything. But I kind of understood why at first. I was like, oh, the reason why you want to come over is because you actually met his mom like 4 years ago. Because it's almost interesting, because it's almost a little stalkery, because it's like, oh yeah, I came to check on you in the real world, but it's kind of a sweet reason, because it's like, well, she knew him so intimately in the realm, and it's like, well, she wanted to be part of his real life as well, kind of bring the relationship over. And obviously that was kind of like a big stop to that when Holden returned and he didn't have his memories. I'm curious about that too. I think my voice just cracked when I said that. I'm curious about that's because also something that was never really answered to, like why he came back without his memories. No one else has had that issues except for Holden. Because I'm sure that's why, like, when she met him back in season 1, she was kind of like, well, met him again in the real world in season 1 after, like, officially knowing him, because it's like, it's like, oh, wait, you don't know who I am and everything. So, but that's kind of a big, it seemed like that was the biggest reason, at least I thought, but it's like, no, just because she didn't want his parents to really, like, she wanted to impress them, sure, but also at the same time, it's like, hence her doing the whole thing about lies upon lies, which is never a good thing, because, like, the moment you start telling lies, they start compiling, and you have to start remembering more and more lies. Especially what she was doing, pharmaceuticals and stuff like that. She almost didn't take time to breathe, because she wanted to make sure she probably got everything out her head that she had rehearsed and everything, which would eventually lead to like Holden's mom and dad asking more questions. So, but once again, she just wanted to impress them. But at the same time, it's like she can't be honest about the relationship. Charlie and Holden could be more honest, which is kind of crazy too, because like the conversation hasn't come up yet, because I think Willa still doesn't know about Charlie. Everyone else is slowly figuring out about Charlie, because even Luke has to be reminded, wait, who's Charlie again? Because he never met her. The only one who actually met Charlie was their mom, which is interesting, because now prior to this, the only one who knew Willa was Luke. So it's just funny how things work out like that. It's kind of like his dad is still kind of out of the loop in all of his relationships. But nevertheless, like there's a little bit more to that, like, because Charlie and his meeting was actually pretty normal. I mean, it kind of ties in with the whole, like, last season when they kind of fake being a couple and everything. It's a lot more believable because they have less they have to lie about, because they met under normal circumstances. Him and Willa, well, their story isn't quite so normal, which kind of adds complexity to the relationship. It's like, how they met and everything. It's a story that you can really tell people. So no matter what the circumstances is, they will always have to lie about the relationship, especially because they're trying to keep, Holden's parents in the dark about everything, So there's that, which is kind of interesting too, because I think they're going to be doing a lot more with Holden's parents this season too, because of the whole, like, the sheriff introduces them to Gail, who's an FBI agent looking into this whole Hollow Sky situation. And she's kind of disorganized, and at the same time, she's super blunt. She's kind of, I don't know, she seems a bit callous at times, but maybe that's just because in this line of work, you need to kind of be like that. It's like, being blunt and being like, oh yeah, Holden might be number 10 on the list of kids that have gone missing in all of Kansas, because 9 have gone missing now. And it's like, if you don't help us out and try and stop this situation, Holden might be, it's like, because the fact of the matter is, don't you think it's a little weird, Holden's circumstances, like his coma, the fact is that he woke up super fine, no motor issues and stuff like that, no brain issues either, that he was perfectly fine, like almost like he was just waking up from a nap, like I said, it was just kind of interesting to me because she's super blunt. But for her, it's like, okay, Miss Matthews, why don't you kind of pick your relationship back up with Ian? That way, he'd be a lot more willing to give you information that way. But Mr. Matthews, not so keen on the idea, but ultimately they kind of come to the decision, like, we might have to do that because we don't know anything. We're still in the dark. They still feel like things are a little weird around with Holden, especially because for Holden, it's like, he's still sleepwalking to the point this season he's starting to tie himself to his bed as a means of dealing with it. It still hasn't stopped him because he woke up in one part of the episode off his bed, but still tied up. So he was trying to leave at the time, so... And then it's just all of the different things, just like, it's like, because his mom can feel it. It's like, there's something there, like he's carrying some burden he's not really sharing with us. And I think that's going to be a big part of this season too, like them not only handling that aspect, which kind of sucks because obviously, they're going to be investigating Willow with everything going on with, Hollow Sky and everything. Like, they're going to be looking into everyone around Holden. So that's going to start getting complicated and everything. It's really quick. I didn't bring it up earlier, but I thought it was kind of interesting. The reason why Holden's mom ended up remembering her from the hospital was because of the whole, like, the way she circles her fingers around, like, the rims of cups. I thought that was kind of an interesting, and it clicked her in the head. It's like, because they went out of the way to say that's like 4 years ago. Like, Willa remembered her immediately. Like, obviously she wouldn't, forget something like that because, like, that's Holden's mom, so obviously she wouldn't forget something like that. But she was hoping on everything that Holden's mom would. I mean, it's been like 4 years. There's no way she'd remember. But it's like, no, because Willa did too good of a job, like, being there. Because, it's like, it's probably one of those points in times when she was kind of low on faith, and Willa kind of restored her faith. It's like, he will come back to you. If he could say anything to you, he definitely would say, like, just wait for him, give him time. He'll return to you soon enough, so... I just thought that was kind of interesting. But kind of going back to what I'm saying, it's going to be interesting seeing what his parents do with this whole situation, because you have two different sides of things. You have Luke and Holden, who know everything. I mean, not even everything. They know a good chunk of it, while his parents know another bit. They know more of, like, the helping hands, like, more... probably the more grounded side of the situation, like, in this whole, like, Hollow Sky situation, the more grounded aspects to it, with kind of like the shadiness of, like, the church and everything like that, and helping hands and stuff like that. Whereas, like, Luke and Holden are more for me with, like, the realm side of things and what this is, like, really all about. So I feel like they have most of the puzzle, whereas, like, his parents have some of the puzzle. So it's just going to be an interesting thing seeing that mystery kind of, like, work out over the course of the season, especially because, like, essentially their mom, Matthews is going to have to go undercover, so, and it's not going to sit too well with their dad, because it's like, it just probably doesn't like the thought of, like, her having to do that, but not much they can do in this situation, especially if they want the truth. Because, Holden and Luke are going to lie their butts off to him, because it's like, we don't want you getting mixed up in all of this. It's Holden's way of protecting them. It also, this whole situation, I think it's something I commented on it back in season 1, or just like Luke's position of being in the know is a very interesting thing, because he's kind of the mediator in this situation, because he's the only, like, quote unquote normal person in this situation, because was never to the realm in the realm. He's just a bystander in this whole situation. Well, not really a bystander, because he's in the smack dab middle of it, just because, being Holden's brother and family and everything. But it's still that situation of like he's in both worlds, because he's the normal life, but at the same time knowing about this realm weird craziness that's surrounding Holden and everything. And I did appreciate that kind of conversation between him and Willow about trying to cheer her up after like the whole dinner quote unquote disaster, which I don't think it was that bad. But I mean, it was kind of that moment to be like, ooh, stop lying, you're making things worse, So it's this weird thing in the back of my mind, like for some odd reason, I kind of get the feeling like they might tilt the story to be more like a Luke and Willa situation, and then to be Holden and Charlie. I mean, part of me kind of wants it to be like that, but at the same time, it's like, because I'm so conflicted in the whole love triangle situation with Holden, because it's like, I kind of want him to be with Charlie, but at the same time, Willow's amazing and such a badass, especially how she handled that whole bar situation. Which Steven's kind of a douchebag, but it's at the same time, it's like, well, he's known Holden since they were kids. It's like, oh, we were in kindergarten and 7th grade together. Then it came the whole coma thing, and but for him, it's kind of that situation of like, you just waking up and you working with your dad now, and it's like you're just going to take our jobs away because it's going to be easy for you because you can rise up the ranks because you're daddy's little boy. It's not, you're not going to work hard for him. It's just like he holds so much spite towards Holden because Holden was treated like such a special kid. It's like, oh, he's so smart, he's such a genius, and now it's like, now you're getting a great pass on life just because you were in a coma. You think that gives you the right to just kind of skate your way through life, which Holden doesn't want. That he doesn't want to be like handed anything. He's willing to work for it and everything, but it's just like, I think Steven's the only one who sees that issue. I mean, other people might have an issue, but Steven's the only one that's super vocal about it, So even trying to do that whole sports thing of like trying to embarrass him when they're having that conversation about sports, in particular basketball. And then he's just kind of like, oh, well, why don't you go up there and ask the balls, or rather your dad, haha, joking, being a douchebag. It's like, well, he kind of got his just dessert when Willow kind of kicked their ass. Because Willow doesn't really have any abilities. Like, anytime we've seen her in the realm, it never really came about. I guess it's still that situation because not everyone who goes into the realm has abilities. Frost never went in there with abilities. Arthur, I don't know why I say Arthur like that. Arthur, maybe? I mean, he trained Holden, but it didn't really seem like he had any, at least that we know of. He's very good at just like disappearing and popping up out of nowhere like he did back in season 1, but nevertheless. But Willa is still well trained, so I think that's also going to be something interesting too, because for Holden, it's like, other than his abilities, he doesn't have any defense, so maybe that'd be something we see this season where like Willa actually trains him to be able to fight without using his abilities, because his abilities are all he has to rely on. I mean, his abilities, the term that Willa used was kind of consequences last season, but maybe that's just because he didn't have control of his abilities. But now that he has better control of them, it's no longer a consequence. It's still kind of an unnatural thing, and I'm still curious to see, will there be ramifications for him doing that, drawing upon the realm and bringing that power to reality, to this world, So, but yeah, going back to Willa's pretty badass because she single-handedly took all those guys down and just like broke Steven's nose. I do appreciate the fact is too that it was like, he even lies about it. He's like, oh yeah, like I had a motorcycle accident and that's what was up. Not like he can admit like what really happened, because that would just cause him more problems. I even love the fact is that him and Holden have to reluctantly work together and everything, because Holden got a new position, got a promotion and everything. And I'm curious to see what they like do with that, because obviously like a big part of this season, as well as like last season was a big part of it, but I think we're going to see it even more this season, because his life is going to be a little bit more under a microscope, even more, especially because like last season, so like, well, Holden didn't know what was going on. Now he does. I mean, there's still aspects he doesn't know, but I'll kind of get to that soon enough. But it's like, there's so many aspects of trying to keep his life normal and keep the realm's weird, crazy, supernatural side of things out of his normal life. And I know that's going to collide, especially he's got someone like Steven breathing down his neck. Can't wait for him to screw up. So I get the feeling that's going to play a part in the story. Plus his whole like balancing his responsibilities and stuff. Plus he's got his parents trying to figure things out too. So it's just, things are going to get complicated from all fronts. And it's something, I don't know if I even thought about this last season. The whole situation with that whole love triangle situation between him, Willa, and Charlie will get even more complicated, because Charlie wants revenge against Arthur. And, the whole her working with Yellow Jacket is to be able to get his location so that she can take him out. But then it's like, well, what about Holden and Willa? It's like, obviously, Holden will probably be sympathetic to Charlie because it's like, well, what Arthur did to her and Annabelle, since Annabelle drew that painting last season of Arthur. So there's that. And we still don't 100% know about what went down to make Charlie hate him as much as she does. Because that was something that was still never answered last season. Like, Yellow Jacket told Willa to ask about the whole situation. Like, oh, what happened to the other people that were essentially like Holden? What happens to those people who Arthur kind of took under his wing? We don't see hide nor hair of any of them. Like, I mean, that was kind of dealt with a little bit last season with all those people that were part of the experiments and everything like that. But still, I think Charlie's going to be our first clear-cut picture of like, okay, what Arthur is willing to do and how far he'll go for his research. We'll kind of see that even more and see what he's really capable of. So like I said, that's just going to get complicated. It's like, oh yeah, I'm with Willa. She's my girlfriend, but obviously I have feelings for Charlie and she's trying to kill my girlfriend's grandfather. So it's kind of that weird sticky situation. It's also an interesting thing too, because Willa never told Arthur. Daniel doesn't know it either. Everything that went down in season 1's finale when they were inside the realm with the whole bridge situation. It's like they know about destroying the bridge, but they don't tell them about Frost and the Celeste situation, about that thing that looked like her mom that essentially devoured them, because it would strip him of all hope, because it's like, oh, like all of them had the hope of like crossing over to the afterlife and meeting the people that they missed. That was the whole point of Hollow Sky, but it's like, no, it seems like that's not the case. The question is, we still don't know what those things are and for what purpose they play in all of this. Like what they are they like, it seems like they're most likely beings from another world that use that bridge as a means to kind of slip through, like the pathway was open, because it's not a pathway that humans are supposed to be getting access to, because the whole realm situation is kind of like, yeah, it's directly connected to the afterlife, but maybe some world in between the realm and the afterlife, or just, the realm kind of gets represented like the afterlife, but the realm is just, the afterlife is a fraction, I feel like it's a section of the afterlife is a section of the realm, but nevertheless, maybe something kind of existed in between those lanes. Like maybe there's like a lane of darkness that those things kind of peek through. It's kind of interesting too, because Holden had a dream about Luke, like the room's flooded with water, and then Luke turns, and he's got like his mouth kind of opens up and got those bugs coming out of it, like that thing at the end of season 1, the no face things. So the question is like, what are they about, and what does that have, like, obviously it's a sign, because later on it comes out just, oh, they are coming. So basically Holden, when he destroyed the bridge, he didn't completely destroy their access. Maybe they still managed to slip through when that was all being all said and done, because of the fact of the matter, when the bridge collapsed, him and Willow were falling. So maybe they didn't see at that time. Like maybe there was something we kind of missed when it was cutting to them waking up in the real world in season 1's finale. So we'll just kind of have to wait and see. Another thing that kind of took me by surprise in this was Charlie's situation, because it took me by surprise, because like, holy crap, Charlie's actually pregnant. I was like, because at first I was like, is she pregnant or is this part of her cover? I was like, no, it can't be part of some cover, because what would be the purpose of it? Turns out there was a purpose for it. I was like, oh wow, okay. I was like about to freak out and everything. I was like, holy crap, so she isn't pregnant. But it also brought up something I never thought about before, because Jeff brought it up. It's like, have you ever thought about kids? And if you did have kids, like, is your whole situation, what he can do, is that hereditary? And it's like, well, is that? I've never thought about that before. Like, what he can do, like, is that something that would pass down? I mean, because he's kind of an enigma with the whole situation being as powerful and being able to do what he can do, manipulating elements and stuff like that. But since it is coming from him, does that mean his children could do that as well? That's a question. Or is it just because it's just specifically Holden and no one else? I mean, everyone else has their own special ties to it. I mean, it makes you wonder if he did, like, for example, him and Charlie, if they did have kids, what would that mean for their kids? Like, would it be a situation of like, oh, maybe one child would have abilities like Charlie's, and another's would have abilities like Holden? I don't know, it's just kind of an interesting thing to kind of think about. But it turns out that was all for the purpose of getting close to a lady named Robin. Turns out, I was like, okay, why is she so important? Like, what is the purpose of all this? It's like, oh, lo and behold, Robin is Tess's wife, and it's like, okay, so this is what Yellow Jacket wanted for Charlie to look into. Also, I love that line of like Charlie being, really, you're just prowling around a paternal like parking lot, a prenatal parking lot, or something like a creepo. Do you want to just get labeled a pervert or something? I love the fact that Charlie's super like sarcastic in a lot of her remarks. Even though I didn't even think about this last season, until they start bringing it up. This episode's was the fact that the whole the truck situation, because the questions came up. I was like, well, yeah, what about the truck? I was like, oh, why are they lying about that? Like, what's up with the truck? I was like, oh, did they leave it in Colorado? And I was like, technically they did. I mean, he did, but Charlie probably used it to get away. Could we see her in a truck later? I'm like, right. Because Holden was shot at the time and Jeff had to like take him away, so his truck was left there. So I was like, right. So she has it, so he's kind of lying about it, because it's not best thing to be like, yeah, I kind of left it in Colorado, and most likely Charlie has it, maybe, not 100% knowing. So it was just kind of an interesting thing too. But it seems that this is all about getting revenge against Tess. For Yellow Jacket, I'm not 100% sure. Like, maybe it's just all the way she treated him last season. It's like, oh, making him like oh yeah, you're the best janitor to that whole situation. It's like, oh yeah, you've been taken off the Holden thing, even though like the Holden thing, it's like the epicenter of this whole like hollow sky situation, but he was kind of taken off of it to, go kill Charlie. So that then begs the question, like, is it just about that? But then we end up finding out like it's about files he has about some girl. But the girl, he's like, oh, is it your daughter? But it's like, no, it's the way Charlie was making the conversation. It's like, oh, so it's not your daughter. So this might be the reason, because this whole situation might finally give us a look into why Yellow Jacket is with Hollow Sky in the first place, because we never found out his reason for being a part of this. Like, for example, Tess, she's not much of a believer, not to the extent like Frost and many others were. For her, it's just like, even if it turns out to be true, oh, awesome. But if even it doesn't, because she was talking to Luke about it in the season finale, it's like, oh, at least you can make money off of it. So that shows you where her like thought process is in this whole situation. But what about Yellow Jacket? Is he a true believer, or was he being manipulated by Tess? Like, it was his reason for joining because it was like something was being held over him. That's kind of what I'm kind of getting at. So maybe that's the daughter of someone that's very important to him. Maybe it is his own daughter. We would just have to wait and see on that. But I did also like the conversation between him and Charlie, because it turns out Tess actually has cancer, because she's going through chemo, which Charlie took her pills, which is super messed up. But Charlie's like, oh, why don't you just let her, slowly die? It's like, well, look at you. You want Arthur. Arthur's super old, but you're not waiting for him to just kick around. It's like, oh yeah, it's, it's for some people, it's just, death is just kind of moving too slow. So we need to kind of intervene and kind of move things up. So, and he also made an interesting statement where I was kind of like, oh yeah, you know what it's like to look down a barrel of someone who's wronged you. And it's like, huh, so Charlie has taken out someone like that in the past. Like, I mean, because Charlie's past is still, we learned a little bit about her last season, but still a lot of her past is of like, using the word again, enigma. So maybe that's something we'll kind of dive into more this season as well. I mean, kind of dive into a lot of people's past, because we don't really know much about a lot of characters in this show. We know bits and pieces here and there, but we don't know everything. Like, for example, like we have Kevin looking after Christine, Kevin's wife, and their child Landon. It also seems like she's part of Helping Hands, which is like, it seems like, especially with Pastor Ian showing up like that, I guess it's supposed to represent the fact that as well, there are many different people kind of mix up in this whole situation. People like Christine who probably don't know everything. Maybe she does, but I get the feeling like it's more like, no, they're kind of, well, I don't know, because it just clicked in my head. It's because she lost Kevin, and the whole like, Hollow Sky situation is like, well, maybe that plays a part in it, or maybe it is just kind of like a, no, I'm just helping out thing, so basically taking and profiting from people's griefs to a certain extent. Maybe that's what that's all about. Like, I don't know, like I said, we just have to wait and see whether she knows anything or not, because I know that the whole connection between Helping Hands and Hollow Sky was found by Jeff, but I don't know if Jeff knows that that's what she's a part of and everything, So I'm also curious to see, will Holden's parents, like, bring Jeff into it, because Jeff's the one that kind of set them on their paths. So I'm curious, will they kind of work with him with this whole situation or not? Also, I brought her up earlier, but it's like, what about the FBI agent? Like, what about her role in all of this? Like, will she kind of prove to be an ally, or will she kind of prove to be kind of a nuisance, in the sense of like Holden and them are still gonna have to find ways around lying to her and stuff like that? I mean, granted, I don't know if she's gonna be someone we see pop up in the story in the sense of like she pops up herself to kind of help investigate, or will she kind of work in the shadows with, Holden's parents. So Willa and Arthur's relationship not really being good, just because she ends up telling him the truth and everything about what went down with Celeste on the bridge in the realm, and he slapped her for it, because for him it's just like that's the driving force behind everything he's ever done, everything he's built so far. And he's still trying to build a machine because he's still driven by like, no, I don't care what she says. I'm gonna go there myself and see Celeste, because that's all he really cares about. I mean, it's kind of a righteous reason to go about doing what it's like, oh, you want to see the person you love again, but it will lead down a dark path. And then there's also that mysterious boy Edgar, who basically went through the same situation as Holden, except his situation was a little bit different. Maybe we don't know for sure at this point in time if he was in the whole coma situation, but he went disappearing like after a storm hit his house in '83. And what's kind of interesting is before he disappeared, he rose up from the rubble because his dad, quote unquote, died protecting him. But it's like when the rubble cleared, it's like he couldn't find his dad. So it's like, did his dad disappear too? Like, did his dad go to that world, get sucked into it as well? And maybe in the long run, only Edgar made it back or something like that. Maybe that's what that might be hinting at. But what's also kind of interesting too is it seems like he's a little disheveled. Maybe he didn't have anyone there to kind of help him when he was in the realm. So basically dealing with all of that and coming back to this world. Once again, it also brings up the question, once again, like, why is it only Holden that suffered the whole like memory loss thing? It's like, maybe did Edgar do it too? But another thing too is like his abilities. The fact is he set that fire with his mind, essentially, kind of very reminiscent of Holden. So it's like, it seems like he might have similar abilities. I mean, so far we've only seen 3 people with abilities from the realm: Charlie, Holden, and now Edgar. But it's like, is his abilities like Holden, where he can manipulate the elements, or is it specifically fire-based, the way his abilities work? I mean, that is the question. We just kind of have to wait in that. But he is waiting to see Holden because of what's coming. Did him and Holden know each other in that time frame? I mean, it seems like at this point in time, Holden's got all his memories back from that 12 years. And like, it seems like most of them came about like throughout the rest of season 1. Like, never really talked about it too much, but it seemed like most of them came back. But I am curious about that. Maybe not all of them did. So maybe he knew Holden during that time, or what? Maybe that'd be something, like I said, something we'll kind of come across soon enough where it's like, oh yeah, like, because they have to be tied too, because the fact is they both talked about the same thing. He talks about seeing the same thing outside the window that Holden sees in that fantasy, not fantasy, that vision of his, where it's like everything's on fire. He even turns around, his house is burning, there's trees burning, it almost looks like volcanic. It kind of ties into what he saw at the end of season 1, but that made it seem like it was more like the realm turned into that, and it's like your world, younger him was kind of like, yo, like, your world is next because of the consequences for what you did, destroying a bridge and everything. So overall, a great season premiere. I'm very excited to see like where a lot of this takes us over the course of this season. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, love life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.